Alright guys, so welcome. So on this next video, I'm going to be redoing my girls' room. I've got 3 daughters. They share this room. Got some other kids as well too. But in this room, we got 3 girls. It's definitely tight. As you can see, we've made the space a bit bigger with this style of bunk bed. I'm 6 feet tall, so it puts into perspective how tall this 3rd bunk bed is. For this holiday, one of the things we wanted to do is to surprise them and bless them with new paint and redo some things in here. We've got a pretty sweet light fixture that we think they're really gonna like. Mom's chosen all of the stuff, of course. That's the safest route to go. She knows better than Dad. It's just painting. And guys, I really dislike painting. For some reason, out of all the DIY things, I don't like painting at all. With that aside, definitely has to get done. So any house with kids, there's gonna be some maintenance and stuff that gets beat up in this bedroom. There are tons of dings, holes where we've had things in the ceilings, things where we've had pictures on the wall that have pulled off plaster, left holes, left dings. We've got some measurements on this door jamb here. I'm gonna come up with a way to move those to somewhere else where we can keep track of that, of the height that our daughters are getting to. Actually, all of our kids are getting to. A potential to redo this closet, hopefully, in the future. Maybe not necessarily on this one. Definitely need to redo some of the spackling around the door as where the doors close. It's broken that away, so I'll be covering that as well. The carpet could certainly use some replacing. Not going to be able to do that this time. Hopefully when we redo the loft, we'll do that as well. So what I'm doing right now is I am just in here taking some measurements of the amount of paint and such I'm going to need. I've got all the tools, I've got all the rollers, don't need anything there. What I do need to make sure I have is ceiling white paint, which I think I already do. My wife has already picked out the paint that we're going to be using for the walls. I just got to get the amount of surface area that I need to be able to cover it all. Thinking a gallon, maybe 2 gallons will do it. We'll see. All right, so I'm gonna go pick up the supplies and get started. So I've officially kicked the girls out of their room with a cover story that I've got to repair something in here. A lot of maintenance in here that's a bit overdue, but it's easy to happen with when you have a bunch of kids, even one kid, of course. But the coloring on the walls, the scuffing, all this stuff, it really builds up. Some of the more localized spots that I do need to repair are right here where this closet door hits. If you can see, there's a little nub on the end of this closet door. It's probably pretty common with most houses, but where it's hitting this drywall, every time it gets slammed, it's just caving this in. It's chipped off a section here. I'm just gonna use some all-purpose joint compound. I just picked this up from Home Depot. Nothing special, just gonna use a normal trowel and then cover this up. Any bigger holes, you could use some mesh like this. I will be repairing these sections here, and it is on both sides. As I mentioned, I would really like to just replace these closet doors. They're not good. This track is really bad. The hardware that holds the doors up there is terrible. They get knocked off all the time, but it's not something we're gonna be able to do it right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and repair these 2 spots, and then we're gonna move into a bigger hole. And we're just gonna show that pretty simple patchwork that you need to do before you do painting. If it's smaller holes, you don't necessarily need to do it. The paint might be able to fill it in. Little pin holes, nail holes, things like that, you might not need to fill it in. Bigger nails, bigger screw holes, you do wanna patch those, as they will show, unless you're gonna do a lot of paint covering, a lot of layers, different coats. The spackle, really quick. One little scrape and you're good to go, paint over. All right, so I've got that joint compound opened up. It's nothing special, just a pre-mix. You could also use the powder form and mix that up yourself if that's what you have. But for smaller jobs, this is pretty simple. It comes in bigger containers as well if you need it. But the pre-mix, super easy to use, just a normal hand trowel. And then this spot right here is pretty decent size. You could mesh it and patch it, maybe chip some out and patch it, but I'm just gonna go right over the top and then let it dry. So pretty deep hole right here where that knob's been hitting. Just gonna fill it in right here where it's chipped off. You wanna make sure that is any of this around it easily peeling off as well, and go ahead and knock that out of the way and then patch it afterwards. But all of mine seems to be attached on this side. I'll double check on that side. And as you put it on, you'll see that there's like a kind of a bubble back on it. Kind of pushes back out on itself. You want to make sure there's enough that it's not gonna cave in. Out is okay, you can sand it down if you need to, but if you get enough in there, when you scrape with this, you should be able to see it fill in nicely. And you wanna get enough that you remove any visible pattern of it. Like you can see this circle, so I definitely need some more there, but I don't want too much where I'm filling in all of my knockdown around it, because otherwise you're gonna see one big patch spot. This is the inside of a jamb of a closet, so not that you're necessarily gonna see it, but you wanna do it right. Otherwise you will notice, and most likely people will see that it has been patched at some point otherwise. So with a little patience, you can get it done right. And if for some reason it dries wrong, you can go right back over it as well. Go ahead and knock this spot out. All right, and then instead of fighting with it, when you got a bigger spot like that, every time you go to scrape over it, you are adjusting that. The goop kind of pushes itself out. So let it dry a little bit, come back, add to it if need be. As you can see, there's a little bit of hole there still, a little bit here. I'm just gonna let it dry and then finish it out, maybe a little sanding around it. We're just gonna do the same thing over here. Again, check around it for any pieces that might want to give. Nothing like that here. You can see that this section here has taken some hits. It's got some dents even in the bead piece here. But again, we're still just gonna fill it in with the compound and move on. You can see that little bit of give right here because it's a pretty deep hole. Again, rather than fighting with it, and I don't want to put a giant amount to have to sand back or anything like that, I'm just going to let it dry and then I'll check it again. And then as you're doing this, you can see you're removing all that knockdown. This is where you can get one of those simple knockdown cans. That's literally what it's called at the store. It's spray on. You spray it on there, it just kind of goops up. You let it dry for whatever the mark time is, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it is. And then you go and knock it down. All right, and there we go. Looks pretty good before we paint it. Once you paint it, it'll fill in some of these spots as well. So you don't necessarily need it to be perfect. I would still get it as close to completely flush as possible, because especially with like a darker paint or something like that, you are likely to see it. Right here we have a bit of a bigger hole. This is, as you can see, it's completely punched through. Honestly, not too big. I mean, that's my thumb. So you could still just spackle this in, or you could use some of the mesh tape. But when you use the mesh tape, you will need to finish out in a bigger pattern. And so this is where needing knockdown is going to come in as well, because you need to finish in this bit of this millimeter or whatever it is thickness. You need to flow that out with the rest of it. So let's go ahead and put some here. Another option, you can totally just do this in a couple layers, let it build up and dry each time. As you can see, even without the mesh, filling it in. Again, not that big of a hole, but it is completely through. So with the mesh, you just cut it down to the size, you put it right over, and then you use the mud itself to seal it. So if you had a bigger hole, like something went through the wall, something fell through the wall, whatever, if it's bigger than your hand or something, they sell patches in multiple different sizes that are pre-cut for that. You wouldn't want to necessarily just do a bunch of strips of tape. Another option is you can cut out, say, a square directly around the hole, and then you can cut your own piece of drywall patch and plug it in with that. You can then use the backing of the drywall as its own tape, and then you just mud right over. You want to take the putty knife and make sure you go across it. Not too much pressure. You don't want to drag the tape out. If you snag, you just press it back down and then do it again. But you just want to light on the pressure and go diagonal across it. You want a putty knife that's large enough to cover it. And then you want to make sure that the putty itself actually covers all this mesh. You can see the grid. You want to make sure that you fill that in. Sometimes it's easier to let it dry and then go over it again. All right, and from here, rather than keep fighting it, every time you do a pass, it wants to come back out. So you could let it set up and then come back once it's dry and do another coat, at which point it'll be that much easier to make that feather out and match up. And since I utilized the patch, I will be using a can of knockdown in order to make this match the rest of the wall. So I'm gonna go hit the couple ceiling spots that I have, and then I'll come back to this one. All right, so this is just one of those hooks that was in the ceiling. Nothing special here. I am just going to patch this one. It's a little bit bigger. I don't remember what hook we had here at one point with a mobile or something over a crib, but it left a pretty decent sized hole. Not going to do anything special. Just going to fill it. And if it pushes back out, like if you can see that, it's got a bit of a bubble out right there. I'll just hit that with some sanding, because otherwise you will be able to see that when you paint. All right, and then another one right up here next to the light fixture. This one's got some tear out. You want to get that out of the way because that's just going to gunk up. So same thing we did with the closet. Just get any chunks that might peel away or get dirty, and then we'll fill it in. And most of the time with this stuff, less is more. The more you scrape, it's like the worse it gets. So if you can be content with it in just a couple passes, you're probably going to be that much happier. All right, while we're at it, I still got to pull this curtain down to make sure anything behind it needs to get repaired, but go ahead and take the opportunity to fix any type of cracking or nail pops. As you can see right there, that one was kind of poking through. Can hear some softness to it, so maybe chip some of that out, and then go ahead and fill it in. And just another call out around this windowsill here. You can see the bead is showing through, or I've got some chip out. This is not somewhere that you necessarily need to fill in with any compound. Painting over that is going to make it disappear just fine. If you had some bigger chips, bigger holing pitting there, you would want to go ahead and fill that in with compound. But something right here, you don't need to worry about it. That will paint just fine. And as you can see here, with filling in some bigger holes as we did, you can get some cracks. Now that it's dried, I'm going to go ahead and top it off again. Again, you want to make sure that nothing's moving around, since that did shrink and crack there. But a second coat there is going to work out well. You can see that it's really taken away the drop down, the knockdown there, so of the pattern of the wall, the finish of the wall. So I am going to end up having to use some knockdown here as well. Not a big deal. All right, so here we are on that bigger hole that I had where I did use the mesh. I do have knockdown. So this is the pattern I have right here. It matches my wall. If you want a wider body one there, that does 30 square feet. And the one I have does 60. So that's why I have so much left over. And then otherwise on the back, it has directions on how to do it. Got a certain amount of time you're going to leave it on the wall once you spray it on, and then you're going to scrape it down, and that's going to create this matching texture here. All right, and after it's been sitting for a little over 8 or so minutes, you just want to lightly take your 6-inch, 8-inch knife, depending on the size of the job, and you want to lightly take it across, okay? As you can see right here, a little heavy, and that makes it just kind of knock down, hence the name. But if you go a little too heavy, you get a bigger patch like that, that's okay. It's still gonna blend in okay. Doesn't have to be anything perfect. And again, this is wet, so this really stands out against the wall. Once it dries, it's not going to. Down here at the bottom of the drywall, if you can see it, any of the splatter from the knockdown, you want to go ahead and make sure you get that off of the baseboard, because otherwise you don't want any texture on the baseboard itself. Just a wet rag can clean it up really well. The texture itself, the one I'm using, is water-based, so it cleans up really easy with water. All right, so here's those other spots. Again, wet, so you can definitely see the difference. I just did that knockdown right over the sections that I had patched. And again, you can see a spot where I went a little heavy on the putty knife there, but it's gonna blend in still decently well. There's always bigger patches throughout your entire wall because nobody's spending a lot of time making this any one specific way. So once we paint, it's all gonna blend in really nicely. The knockdown that I just applied takes about 5 hours to dry, so I'm not gonna be painting that today. That's gonna be tomorrow. Now I'm gonna go ahead and knock out the ceiling because I don't have anything else precluding me from doing that. The patching that I did up there is long dried. I've gone ahead and removed that from the mount. It's just hanging there. I will be replacing that as well, but I need to be able to paint underneath it up to that hole. So that's knocked down. Everything else for the ceiling itself is out of the way. For this next step, I just have some flat white ceiling paint. It's very specific when you pick it up. It's Behr. We typically go with that. You could do cheaper stuff as well, but this has been good for us. And it's flat ceiling white. I've also got some 9-inch rollers here. You can tell the difference by the colors typically, but this is a 3/4 inch nap. And that means that a textured wall, something like that, this is going to get into those grooves and put the paint in there. It's going to be a little easier to paint faster. That's why it costs a little more. It holds a little more paint and puts it in deeper. You can get away with some cheaper ones. We might have to do more coats depending on the style of texture you have. If you have a flat wall with no texture, you can get away with doing basically nothing because you don't have to get into those grooves. You can do a much lower nap. But otherwise, these are something I already had left over, so I didn't buy anything to do this. Just got to use one for each color that I apply. I'm going to attempt to do a couple coats, let it dry for half hour or so before applying another one. I'm inside, heater's on. Should be able to apply a couple coats this evening just for the ceiling alone. If I get to any spots where I did put that compound in, I just have a hand, one of those sanding blocks, can knock down any sharp edges, something that might show up, knock it down before I paint. Of course, just a normal hand roller. I also have this big reacher here where I could do this with just my one hand, maybe a step stool. I can reach this spot right here, no problem. But with a tool like this, it allows you two hands and it allows you to reach it much easier. So I do suggest using something like this for the ceiling specifically. Anything else that's within reach, you can use the hand one. But I've had this one a long time, as you can see with the paint and stuff all over it, but it has served me well. You buy one once and it's going to last you for all of your future jobs. All right, and then for mixing my paint, I do have my cordless drill here, and then I've got one of these paddles here. It works really well for mixing paint. You can just find them in your normal aisle. Versus using the stick, this mixes it up really well. You just don't want to use too much speed on it. I've got just this piece of Coroplast down here. Certainly use drop cloths to protect any of your surfaces. Putting it over the bed would probably be best, but I'm just going to be moving that out of the way as I go. So I just got to mix this up, and then I'm going to be utilizing that pan there. It's a much larger one than I need, but buying once, it's really good. It's lasted a long time. Super easy to clean since it's plastic. I'm just going to start hitting the ceiling. I'm not doing any type of taping here since I'm going to be doing the walls with something different. I'm not worried about white getting over there. In fact, I'm actually going to use some of this white just to hit some of the spots where unfortunately marker and other things have been. That'll just help that not bleed through with the next coat. So it's going to be kind of like a primer, but otherwise this is meant just for the ceiling. Again, I'm just going to use it for some touch up before my real coat on the walls. Now it's just a matter of taking your time, making sure you hit all the spots. Be a little quicker on this because, again, I'm not too worried about hitting the walls. I'm just going to go right over it. All right, so I am about to move on to the walls. I've let the ceiling dry. I've got the curtains down and everything ready to start painting the walls. My concern is I'm doing this during the night after getting off from work. I don't have any daylight coming through windows. I'm working strictly off the light that I have here on the ceiling. And this bunk bed's casting a shadow as well. So I'm kind of worried about getting any type of streaks. You want to make sure you get a nice smooth finish, hitting every single line with the roller and such. That's hard to do, to make sure you get an even coat if you don't have the right lighting. So a work light would certainly work for parts of that, but honestly nothing beats daylight coming through the windows. So if I was able to look at this during the day, I'm really on a time crunch. Not able to do that. So working with what I'm able to do, I might have to do some touch up afterwards. I'm hoping not. As you can see, I've got a bunch of just random white spots here. This is me treating some of that ceiling paint as a primer, something to just help make those marks go away. And then when I put that wall coat on there, they won't show through. Pretty regularly when you're painting over something where marks or any type of dirty walls and stuff, if you don't hit it with a few coats, it's going to show through. So this just kind of helps jumpstart me there. So while I had the paint can out, I hit every mark throughout the room just with some extra ceiling paint. It didn't take a lot at all because, again, I'm just hitting little scuffs, little marks, nothing special. Unfortunately, I have young kiddos, so a lot of marker and things like that had made it onto the wall. So hopefully we don't do that again in the future, but I'm sure we will. One of the things I attempt to do is have to tape as little as possible. So painting the ceilings is not a big deal when I am going to paint the walls, if paint gets on the wall, of course. But now that I'll be doing a separate color here, going up to the ceiling, do have to tape. Taping is one of the most time-consuming pieces, so I got to spend some time getting that tape up around the edge there on the ceiling part, and then using a paintbrush, I'm going to go ahead and hit all of the edge there, give myself enough room that I can come back with a roller and I get a nice smooth line. I'm not letting the paint dry too long so the tape doesn't get stuck or any of that stuff, any bleed through. If you're using good tape, that shouldn't happen anyways, but all those things just in case, get done with that part first and then move on to painting the entire wall. I don't need to tape the trim on this pass because the trim is going to have yet another paint on it. So if some of this one gets on the trim, that'll be okay. The paint that's going to be on the trim is just a slightly different hue of the same color, and so I'll be using that different color on the doors and the trim, closet doors and the bedroom door, and the trim will all be that one color and the walls will be a separate color. So once I get to that, I will have to tape again. All right, so my taping's done. I didn't do anything special. I just did one strip at a time, step stool. You could do long strips, of course. They have tools that make it pretty easy. I don't have any of those, just doing what I've got. All right, since I'm gonna be hitting this edge with just a paintbrush first instead of hitting with the roller, you can totally use the roller, but if the roller is wider than the paint, or if you slip, you could definitely end up getting paint on the ceiling. I don't want to have to go and clean that up, wipe it off or anything like that, or repaint. So I'm just gonna hand paint all of the trim. It takes a little bit, but I don't have to go back and clean anything up. To make it easier, I have this handy pail here. So it's called handy paint pail, just at Home Depot, probably at Lowe's as well. You just get your paint in there. It's got a nice thick grip as well, so it'll fit any number of hands rather than carrying the paint pail around. If the paint pail is lower in paint, that's not so hard to do. But if you're carrying around a brand new paint pail, not comfortable, the handle sucks. But this one makes it really handy. And then also, it's got a magnet right there on the inside. So super convenient for this type of work. If you need to set down your paintbrush for anything else you're doing. And then otherwise, you just paint like normal, scrape up here, set it back in there, and then you don't have to leave it in the paint itself. It can sit a little up out of it. That way you're not just sticking your whole paintbrush in there as well. And I'm using a 3-inch brush here. I don't need to do anything thin. I just want to make sure I don't hit the ceiling, of course. When I go to do the trim down below, I will do a thinner brush. And I want to give myself a little bit of a space here to work with the roller, that way I don't have to reach too high and again, not slip and hit the ceiling. And I want to make sure I get it in all of the little crevices of the spackled wall. And I want to attempt to get this in one go. That way I can remove this tape, because otherwise this paint that I'm putting up here will get stuck to the tape itself. You want to try and get that off of the wall while it's still somewhat wet. And so just like anything else, I tend to want to work from the top down. So ceiling, wall, trim down below. You know, just like when you're cleaning something, you work from the top down, making the floor the last thing you're cleaning. What do you guys think? What do you typically do when you're painting? Do you prefer to paint the wall and then trim it out up top? If you're actually doing crown or something, that might make some more sense, but I still think it's easier to go ceiling to floor. My wife chose Blueberry Whip for the walls. I've got all the edges near the ceiling and all of the corners done just to make it easier for when I'm using that roller. I don't have to get anywhere near those surfaces. Another good trick when you're doing the taping like this, you put the tape up and then you apply caulking, like just some cheap painter's caulk, along that seam that you just created, and that will make a perfect cut when you go to pull that tape. So if you're trying to make perfect edges, that right there is the best way to do it. I did not do it in this one because I've honestly got limited time to get this one done, but when you're trying to make those really crisp edges, there's nothing better than that. And you can't see it, but it makes a perfect cut when you peel it away. Walls, ceiling are basically done. I do have some touch-up spot where the tape pulled off kind of normal. I'll just be using a knife and painting those with some touch-up a little later on. But right now I've got the doors laid out here. I will be go ahead and knocking these out. These are a different color than what I've done thus far, so I'm going to be using that new color on these, as well as the trim and the entry door. These are the closet doors. I've got them laid out where I can easily get to them. Only going to really do one side, not too concerned what the inside of the closet looks like on this one. And then while I'm also at it, I'm going to be touching up these corners of the windows before I put the shades back as well. Laying out the doors just to make them easier to get to rather than painting them where they're at. Also just taping up this hardware, as I don't have a good way to take it off without potentially making it loose, because it's just one that's snapped into the hole. No type of hardware to pull out or anything like that. This is just a re-washed roller that I had used from the ceiling, so if you take care of them, wash them right after, they're going to hold up for a little while, but certainly don't push it if you think it's dried up or anything. Don't let that impair you. Another good tip is if you're going to use the same color again, you can just throw them in a bag and it actually keeps the roller itself in the paint and not drying out. For some of these grooves, paintbrush is going to be a little easier. These closet doors that I have appear to be pretty raw, so they're soaking some of that up. So probably going to take 2 coats. All right, so I'm onto the trim, and just rather than taping everything, I've just got a piece of cardboard here that I can slip right under the trim like so. And then you could also do this with just a large putty knife, taping knife, something like that. But since I need 2, I need 1 to block the carpet and then 1 to block up top. With the 2 of them in place, this will make it where I don't have to do any taping on the wall or any draping on the carpet. And I'm able to get just the trim. And then you can move the knife along as you go. A knife like this also works really well alongside the door jamb like so, and then you can paint right against it. So rather than having to do all that taping. All right, and that's it. So everything is painted, everything's back in place. Got the fixture installed for the light as well. That was picked to match some of the tones of the paint that my wife chose. Always default to what Mama wants to do. Best choice as far as getting the right colors and such. So we went with a normal flat white ceiling paint to put on the ceiling there, of course. I did that first before taping everything down, as I showed you guys, and then we went with this Blueberry Whip and then a secondary color that Mama chose for the doors and the trim. And it took a little bit to get everything covered up. I showed you there with a bunch of markers and other stains on the wall. I went ahead and used some of that ceiling white paint to make sure those are covered up as kind of a primer coat. Even though the Behr paint that I chose does have a primer aspect to it, you just want to make sure none of that's going to show through, and you don't want to have to do too many coats if you don't have to. I was able to do this with basically 2 coats throughout. Some of the areas I didn't necessarily have to do it. For the most part, 2 coats. Specifically on the doors and the trim, I did a very high gloss. Mama wanted to do a flatter shine to the walls and then a high gloss to the trim and the doors to really make those pop out separate from the walls themselves. So with that higher gloss, it's a little harder to put on. Did require a few more coats, especially for those doors, for the closet doors. Those were raw doors, had never been painted except for however the builder had processed them, so probably never painted on site, just how they ship. But otherwise that ended up soaking up a bunch of paint there, so it required a couple coats. But they look good now. We also got everything all set up and pretty. So at this point, the surprise has been revealed. Let them know that the fix was in the whole time, that there was never any repairs besides general maintenance. So I'm just gonna take you around to some of those things that I did patch and fix, as well as some of the different colors. All right, and here's those doors with most of the trim as well. Again, it is 2 different tones that we used on the wall. We have a Blueberry Whip for the main wall paint, and that is an eggshell finish, and a semi-gloss Powder Lilac is the color of this, and my wife chose it to just be partly off from each other, and again wanting the sheen to be one of the main separating factors. And we did use this Powder Lilac with the semi-gloss on all the trim, the doors inside, but not the outside of the bedroom door there. As you can tell, between the Blueberry Whip and the Powder Lilac, they're pretty close. This one's a little darker, but the piece that really makes it pop is the fact that this is semi-gloss versus that eggshell. It's kind of tough to pick up on the camera, but in person it is very noticeable. This is much shinier than the walls themselves. Moving into some of that patched area, this is that section where the closet door had hit and really chipped this apart. This is all just patched, again, with that normal pre-mixed compound that I picked up from Home Depot, and then repainted. We did not paint the inside of the closet, just the outside. As you can see, it matches perfectly. We did that on both sides. I did use some spackle to patch up there as well. All right, and then right here is where I patched that bigger hole that had actually punctured through. Nothing really special here, not reinventing the wheel, just general maintenance that you can do in your own home without spending a lot of money, blessing my kids with a refinished, repainted room, and at the same time repairing some of the things that needed to be done where it was flecking off around the closet door, as well as covering up some of the marker spots that they did when they were a little younger. All just general maintenance, different holes in the walls and stuff. Just sharing some of the projects that my family and I are doing, whether it's in the house, in the shop, in the wilderness, whatever it may be. Please like and subscribe. It goes a long way to building this channel. Just looking to be a good steward of all that's put in front of us. Again, I appreciate you watching. I'll see you on the next video.